So, here we have perniciously mendacious George, whose last name points to something saintly in the plural, but this guy is far from saintly in the singular, much less the plural. Now caught in multiple lies about his past, his religion, his previous occupations, and pretty much whatever else you can think of, he's lied about. And for him, most worryingly on account of legal liability, it's sounding like his finances are getting linked to possibly sketchy sources, pyramid schemes, potential money laundering, etc. In other words, a royal mess, complete with members of his own party, which is really saying something since the GOP these days has definitely drifted into major hypocrisy and corruption, but even so, a number of his work colleagues are urging, sometimes even demanding, that he resign his position. Of course, not Kevin McCarthy, because just like the orange criminal he slavishly follows, he wants to keep every vote. Kevin and Donnie are always short votes after all. So even if it means cozying up to insurrectionists, fascists, cranks, and seditionists, they're okay with it. And in that sense, for Kevin, George is bad. But yes, sure, he could be even worse. And let's face it, Kevin is hard up for votes these days. So amazingly, he is still endorsing Santos because, as he and George say, the people elected him, neglecting to mention a lot of them in the district that elected him are now up in arms upon discovering they voted for a total fraud. His chart here is drawn for July 22nd, 1988, which, as reported by the internet search engines, is what appears to be his birth date. But we must remember this is George Santos, or Anthony Devolver as he was recently known. So when it comes to this guy, who knows if that date is actually accurate? Hopefully, someone other than him has made it public, because if it came from him, we would need to suspect it wasn't true. But, hoping and assuming that it is correct, we still don't have a birth time, which means no ascendant or midheaven to work with, and therefore reduced astrological visibility. But even so, I can still see some interesting information just from the planet alignments on his day of birth, particularly within the context of what is already known about this person, by which I mean he has established himself as an unsavory and very corrupt con man, though we can, even if reluctantly, also admit he has been quite effective at it since he got himself elected to Congress. But, on the other hand, it's also true, the effectiveness of his scam was quite short-lived, since even prior to being sworn in, the cat was out of the bag and he was being challenged by everybody and everything in regard to his many lies. You see this type of behavior and you always suspect Neptune involvement, Neptune on the low side of course, as the planet of illusions, deceptions, frauds, and scams, as well as liars, crooks, and corruption. And when you see Neptune square Mars, as well as part of a natal T-square through the opposition to Mercury, you've identified the most likely source of his astrological scamming correlation. So then you notice that Neptune in recent years has been squaring his Venus, which would be perfect for imagining, plotting, and concocting the outrageous plan he acted upon in order to secure a house seat. You can also see that by last year in the summer, the transiting Neptune came within 1.5 degrees of squaring his Saturn, which would have continued the scamming scheme and also correlate with what was effectively the campaigning season prior to the November election. So now he's in his seat, refusing to listen to any calls for resignation, and is being supported in his steadfast refusal by his party leader, the very feckless and by now also very corrupt Kevin McCarthy. So for now, he remains one of the members of the class of 2023 GOP House Representatives, but we see transiting Neptune moving toward an exact square of his Saturn and Uranus, and in a station which will greatly magnify the effect right around the end of June and early July. This is certain to be a problematic transit for Tricky George, because if Neptune is what got you here, Neptune is also the one that can take you down. The station is the end of June, early July, but this is something you would deal with all of June and all of July, as the station is building and then fading on the other side. And then we see that he has another problem that is likely to be even more threatening, and that he has a Pluto-Moon conjunction at birth, with Pluto squaring a Sun, which might be in very late Cancer or very early Leo, depending on what time he was born. And the confident brazenness of his actions inclines me to think Leo. But either way, by the time Pluto gets into super late Capricorn and then super early Aquarius, meaning where it will be from March until the end of June, Pluto brings that dangerous birth square energy into a Sun opposition transit, which is more than enough to signify the curtain call on his outrageous treachery. Bottom line, this guy may think he's gotten away with it, or at least will get away with it if he hangs tough long enough. But once we get into March, he's looking at 5 solid months of intense pressure before he sees even minimal daylight. Translation, I think George Santos, the Pinocchio GOP House Representative, is unlikely to see the end of summer 2023 in his current job.